I'd always prided myself on my instincts. Years guiding hikers through jagged terrain, reading the snow for signs of avalanches, understanding the subtle shifts of wind and ice, it had all trained me to trust what I saw and felt. So, when I narrowly survived a minor avalanche last week, the adrenaline still thrummed through me, my lungs tight, my fingers numb from gripping the icy crust. Kian's lifestyle, with its luxury chalets and curated safety measures, had never mattered in the moment of survival. The truth hit me with clarity. My life, my safety, had always been my own responsibility. Kian had left 2 days ago, claiming an urgent business meeting in the city. I had initially been relieved. Finally, the apartment was quiet, and I could think without listening to the hum of his curated control. But relief was fleeting. While cleaning the study, my eyes fell on the small, hidden safe he'd always claimed was for emergency documents only. I had never had reason or courage to open it before. But something in the air after the avalanche, in the raw realization of my own independence, demanded that I look. I knelt before the safe, my fingers shaking slightly, not from cold, but from anticipation. Kian had always left a trail, confident that no one else would see it. The combination, a simple string of digits he thought I wouldn't guess, clicked open with a soft, mechanical sigh. My pulse quickened. Inside were stacks of envelopes, yellowed slightly at the edges, rubber-banded together in neat piles. The handwriting on the top envelope was unmistakable, Kian's careful, looping script. I pulled one envelope free. Inside was a school report card, dated years ago. My brow furrowed. "What the?" I muttered, reading the name aloud, almost to test my own disbelief. Leo Rossi. The grades, teacher comments, even a tiny gold star sticker for outstanding conduct, all confirmed it was for a teenager. A teenager? I flipped through the next envelope. Another report card, this one more recent. Each envelope was labeled and meticulously preserved, chronicling the academic life of a child Kian had never once mentioned. And then, tucked under the last envelope, a photograph slipped out. My stomach knotted as I unfolded it. There they were, Kian, Nadine, his high school sweetheart who now managed the resort, and a boy I could only assume was Leo. They were smiling in front of a decorated Christmas tree, holding gifts, laughter frozen in the glossy print. This wasn't a fling, wasn't a casual secret. This was a family, maintained for over a decade, hidden from me entirely. I sank to the floor, staring at the photo, my hands trembling. The avalanche had given me a gift I hadn't asked for, perspective. And now, the reality of Kian's deceit hit like another avalanche, heavier this time, burying all the illusions I'd held about him, about us. My life was mine. My choices, my independence, my survival, these were the truths I would build on. I whispered into the empty apartment, almost as if Kian could hear, no more lies. And for the first time in years, I felt the pulse of clarity, of self-reliance, stronger than fear. I knew exactly what I had to do next. Sleep didn't come that night. The photograph lay face up on my desk, staring back at me like a silent accusation. Kian had built a life parallel to mine, one I had no part in, no inkling of. Every moment of our relationship suddenly felt tainted by the weight of omission. The avalanche had taught me to trust my instincts, but now they screamed at me to dig deeper. The next morning, I drove to Nadine's office at the resort. I claimed I was there to check on some equipment, but really I needed to see if the photograph had been a fluke. I needed proof, tangible and undeniable. The receptionist, a cheerful young woman, didn't seem surprised to see me. She handed me a small stack of recent newsletters and staff announcements. My heart pounded as I leafed through them. There it was, a Christmas party recap, featuring Kian, Nadine, and Leo. My stomach twisted. The boy in the photograph wasn't a toddler or a recent child. He was a teenager, confident and smiling, clearly comfortable with both adults. I walked through the resort, my eyes scanning every corner. I recognized Leo from the photograph immediately. He was practicing on the ski slope, instructors nearby. The resemblance to Kian was undeniable, sharp jawline, dark hair, piercing eyes. And Nadine? She moved among staff as if she owned the place, every smile, every gesture controlled and assured. It wasn't just a family, it was a public, functioning unit. I stepped back, my hands gripping the railing of the viewing deck. All this time, and I knew nothing. I muttered under my breath. My voice sounded hollow even to me. The avalanche had taught me survival, but this betrayal was emotional quicksand. I didn't need to confront them yet. Proof was power, and I intended to gather every piece. I took out my phone and discreetly photographed Leo on the slope, the newsletters, even a glimpse of Nadine's office door with her nameplate. I had learned in the mountains to document everything. Evidence was survival. Back in my cabin, I set the photos beside the report cards and the photograph from the safe. Layer upon layer of evidence, all pointing to the same truth. Kian's life had been built on a mission, carefully curated to hide what mattered most from me. I sank into a chair, breathing deep, the cool mountain air filling my lungs. The lesson of the avalanche echoed in my mind. Trust yourself, trust your instincts, and act decisively. I can't change the past, but I can control the next step, I whispered to the empty room. And I will. That night, as the wind rattled the shutters, I knew it. I had everything I needed to confront the truth, and to ensure Kian could never manipulate my life again. The next morning, I called Blake. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed, partly from anger, partly from the lingering adrenaline of what I had uncovered. Blake picked up after the third ring. Adeline? Everything okay? His voice carried that calm certainty I had always relied on in the field. I found something. I began carefully, choosing my words. About Kian, about Nadine, about Leo. There was a pause, long enough that my heart skipped a beat. Then, I'll drive over. Don't touch anything else until I get there. By the time Blake arrived, the sun was just clearing the peaks, casting sharp golden light over the pine forests. His truck rolled up, and he hopped out, every movement precise and assured. I led him inside, showing him the envelopes, the photograph, the newsletters. I watched his jaw tighten as he scanned each piece. This isn't just a secret, Blake said finally, his voice low. He's been hiding a whole family. And if these finances were mingled with resort operations, this could be serious. Yes, I said, swallowing. And I want to make sure he can't manipulate anything or anyone with this. I want to reclaim my life, Blake. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Then we'll do it right.
Strategically.
No leaks. No mistakes. Just the facts, solid and indisputable. We began by mapping the information. The hidden safe, the envelopes, the newsletters, the photographs, all linked. Blake took notes, cross-referencing what I had found with public records and resort documents. If Kian has been funneling funds to cover Nadine and Leo, that's embezzlement, he said quietly. My stomach twisted, but I felt a spark of vindication. The avalanche had taught me survival. Now this was strategic survival. I was not just exposing a betrayal. I was protecting myself and reclaiming control over my life. Later, we walked the perimeter of the resort. I observed the structures, the guest lodges, the staff quarters. Blake's eyes missed nothing. He's been sloppy in hiding the family, but meticulous in covering financial tracks, Blake noted. That gives us an edge. I nodded, feeling a clarity I hadn't known in months. I'm done being blind. Done trusting him. Done letting him dictate what I deserve. He turned to me, softening slightly. You're not just brave in the mountains, Adeline. You're smart. You'll handle this, carefully but decisively. As the wind whipped down the slopes, I felt the rebirth take hold fully. My independence, my instincts, my capacity to survive, it wasn't just for avalanches. It was for life itself. And this time, I wouldn't allow anyone, not even Kian, to derail it. I glanced at Blake. I want your help. Not just for strategy. I trust you. He gave a small, firm smile. You have it. Every step of the way. For the first time in months, I felt safe. Not because Kian had ever protected me, but because I had chosen someone whose loyalty was earned, deliberate and real. The night after Blake arrived, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the photograph in my mind. Kian, Nadine, and Leo, smiling at Christmas in a home I had never known existed. Each detail now felt like a deliberate betrayal, a reminder that everything I had trusted had been carefully manipulated. Blake arrived early the next morning, armed with his laptop and a stack of files he had pulled from public property records. "I've traced some of the transfers you mentioned," he said, spreading the documents across my kitchen table. "There are gaps, offshore accounts, and what looks like misdirected resort funds. It's messy, but it's all traceable." I leaned over the papers, feeling a mixture of shock and relief. "So, it's not just emotional betrayal," I said quietly. "It's financial, too. He's been living a double life with everything he has." Blake nodded.
"Exactly.
"And now, we have leverage, not to ruin him personally, but to protect you and the people he's misled professionally." I ran my fingers through my hair. I've been so blind. I let him manipulate me because I thought survival meant trusting him. But the avalanche, the near-death, it made me see that I can't rely on anyone else to protect me. "You don't have to," Blake said. "You're not alone. But you also don't have to do this by yourself." His eyes held a quiet intensity that made my chest tighten. Together, we built a plan. I would document everything from my perspective: photographs, correspondences, evidence of Kian's financial negligence. Blake would cross-check against public records and his professional contacts in regulatory boards. "We're building a fortress of truth," he said, almost reverently. We spent hours reconstructing Kian's timeline: vacations with Nadine that coincided suspiciously with business trips, invoices for renovations at the hidden home, communications he had meant to keep private. Each discovery strengthened my resolve. At one point, I paused, staring at a photograph of Kian shaking hands with investors. "I can't believe I stayed this blind for so long," I muttered. Blake leaned closer. "You're not weak for trusting him. You're smart for recognizing it now." His words, calm but firm, stirred something deeper than relief, a spark of something I hadn't felt in years: trust. He glanced at me, and for a moment, I caught the weight in his gaze, the unspoken care that went beyond strategy. My heartbeat quickened, but I pushed it aside. This was about survival and truth first. By nightfall, we had a comprehensive plan. The evidence was organized, the strategy outlined. I felt a power I hadn't felt before, one that wasn't about dominance, control, or revenge, but about reclaiming my life and refusing to be collateral in someone else's deceit. I finally whispered, though only to myself, "I'm reborn. And this time, my life is mine." Blake watched me, a faint, approving smile tugging at his lips. "And you won't just survive this," he said. "You'll thrive." The morning air was crisp as I stepped onto the balcony of my cabin, the mountain light spilling across the snow-covered pine. I felt the weight of the evidence folder in my hands, but it wasn't fear I felt, it was purpose. Each page, each photograph, each document was a step toward reclaiming what Kian had stolen: my trust, my independence, my life. Blake had arrived early, as always, his presence calm and reassuring. He didn't hover or over-explain. He simply was there, grounding me while I confronted the chaos Kian had created. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low but steady. I nodded, gripping the folder tighter. "Ready as I'll ever be." He needs to see that the truth doesn't stay buried. We started with the local regulatory board, presenting the detailed audit Blake had compiled. I felt my pulse quicken as I laid out the timeline: unexplained absences, misdirected resort funds, the hidden life Kian maintained. The officials were attentive, but I knew the real impact would come from the cumulative weight of our evidence, the clarity of the facts, uncompromised and undeniable. Later, in the quiet of the afternoon, Blake and I huddled over his laptop, cross-referencing public records with our own documentation. I found myself laughing softly at some of Kian's absurd attempts to cover tracks, and Blake chuckled with me. The tension eased in that small shared space, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel a flicker of something beyond focus and anger, something warm, protective, and familiar. "Adeline," he said, his hand brushing against mine as he passed me a document, "you've handled this with incredible strength." He underestimated you. I met his eyes, feeling a current of connection I couldn't ignore. "I've been blind for too long," I admitted. "But this is different. I'm not just reacting anymore. I'm alive." Blake's gaze softened, and for a moment, the weight of the situation lifted, replaced by a quiet intensity that made my chest flutter. "You're alive," he said, almost a whisper, "and you deserve someone who sees you for that." Our strategy began to yield results. Kian's financial irregularities were flagged, investors were asking questions, and the hidden family's presence became impossible to ignore. Each revelation was like chipping away at a wall that had kept me caged in his deceit. And yet, through it all, Blake remained steadfast, not just a partner in exposing Kian, but a source of unwavering support. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley, I realized something profound. Surviving the avalanche had taught me to trust my instincts. Now, exposing Kian had taught me to trust myself. And standing beside Blake, I understood that strength and care could coexist. When we finally stepped outside into the evening chill, I felt the cold bite at my cheeks and the exhilaration of clarity in my chest. Blake slipped his arm lightly around my shoulder, a gesture that was protective but not possessive. I leaned in, feeling the steady heartbeat of someone who had always been quietly on my side. "This," he said, nodding to the mountains, the snow, "the evidence safely compiled, is just the beginning." And I knew he was right. The air was sharper that morning, the mountains glinting like silver under the rising sun. I carried the folder of evidence, each page a reminder of Kian's betrayals. But today, I wasn't feeling fear. I was ready to confront the consequences he'd left in his wake, and ready to claim my life back, fully. Blake met me at the edge of the resort property, leaning casually against his truck, his gaze steady and unwavering. "Morning," he said, the faint curve of his smile cutting through the chill. "You look ready for war." I laughed softly, gripping the folder. "More like ready for justice." He walked beside me as we approached the main office, the building humming with activity. I could see Kian inside, unaware that the walls of his carefully constructed deception were beginning to crumble. The first set of investors had already arrived, summoned by Blake's meticulous pre-warning, and murmurs of concern were drifting through the lobby. As we walked in, I felt a wave of exhilaration. "This ends today," I whispered, almost to myself. Blake's hand brushed mine, grounding me in the moment. His touch was firm but gentle, a silent promise that I wasn't alone. Inside, we distributed the documentation to the board and regulatory inspectors. Each photograph, each ledger, each report card was laid out with precision. I could see the disbelief on their faces as the full scope of Kian's deception unfolded. The hidden teenage son, the misuse of resort funds, the double life maintained for over a decade. Blake leaned in, murmuring, "You're incredible, Adeline. I don't think anyone else could have held themselves together like this." I glanced at him, my heart catching in my throat. I didn't do it alone. His eyes met mine, dark and steady, and in that look, I felt a depth of trust and something more, a connection forged through shared danger and quiet loyalty. Hours passed in a blur of meetings, calls, and formal hearings. Every challenge Kian tried to throw at us, his lawyers, his carefully rehearsed statements, was dismantled by the clear, undeniable facts. And through it all, Blake stayed close, his presence a constant reminder that some people truly acted with integrity. By late afternoon, the final confirmation came. Kian's accounts were frozen, regulatory investigations were underway, and the insurance boards were reviewing his mismanagement. Relief washed over me, but it was tempered by exhaustion. Outside, the sun was dipping behind the mountains, painting the valley in gold. Blake walked beside me, his hand finding mine, fingers intertwining naturally. "You did it," he said softly. "You faced everything and you didn't falter." I squeezed his hand, leaning slightly into his shoulder. "I couldn't have done it without you." He smiled, And for the first time, his expression softened into something that wasn't just camaraderie, it was affection. "I'll always be here, Adeline. Through storms, avalanches, whatever comes." The wind whipped across the snowy peak, but with Blake beside me, I felt grounded, protected, and, most importantly, free. The mountain had nearly claimed me once, but together, we had reclaimed my life, and in that reclamation, I found the first stirrings of something I hadn't allowed myself in years: hope and love. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and frost. I felt different stepping onto the snow-covered trail today, not the frightened woman buried under Kian's lies, but someone fully awake, fully alive. Every step I took with Blake beside me reminded me how much I had relied on my instincts, and how much stronger I was with someone who shared them. We arrived at the regulatory office just as the investigators were gathering. Blake, calm as ever, guided me through the process. "Stick close," he murmured. "They'll ask tough questions, but we've got everything." I nodded, gripping the folder of evidence tighter. Seeing Kian's web of deception laid bare had been surreal, but now it was time for accountability. As the investigators combed through documents and photographs, I noticed the subtle shifts: the raised eyebrows, the whispered confirmations, the looks of incredulity. Kian's meticulously curated life was collapsing in real time. Later, we moved to the insurance review board. They were already aware of discrepancies in resort safety protocols and financial mismanagement, thanks to Blake's preemptive reporting. As the board reviewed each item, the weight of years of manipulation and betrayal lifted from my shoulders. Every fraudulent expense, every hidden ledger entry, every photograph of the secret family was proof that I hadn't been imagining the cracks. I had just been blinded by trust. During a short break, Blake slipped a cup of coffee into my hands. "You've been holding so much, Adeline. I want you to know it's okay to let it out." His gaze lingered, full of something I couldn't yet name, but didn't want to. I looked down at the warm cup, feeling a shiver of emotion. "I'm not used to someone actually being here," I admitted. Blake's hand found mine again, gripping it with quiet certainty. "I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to face this alone." The remaining part of the day was a blur of signatures, recorded testimonies, and official confirmations. By late afternoon, we had witnessed Kian's assets frozen, regulatory investigations initiated, and public records updated. The avalanche of consequences left no room for doubt. Justice, at least in this corner of my life, had been served. Outside the office, the world was calm, the snow sparkling like crushed diamonds under the fading sun. I felt my chest loosen in a way I hadn't in years, and I realized I could breathe without fear for the first time. Blake turned to me, his eyes reflecting the orange glow of sunset. "You did it. You faced everything and stood tall." I met his gaze, feeling warmth spread from my heart to my fingers. "We did it. Together." His smile widened, softer than I had ever seen. "And together is just the beginning, isn't it?" I laughed quietly, leaning into him as we walked toward the edge of the snowy trail. "Yes," I whispered. "It's just the beginning." For the first time, I felt not just relief, but anticipation for a life built on honesty, trust, and the steady, unwavering presence of someone who valued me as much as I valued the truth. The air smelled of snow and pine as Blake and I stepped back onto the trail that had once been a battlefield of fear and betrayal. Today, it felt different, clean, open, and infinitely full of possibility. The weight of Kian's deception was finally behind me, and every step forward felt like reclaiming a piece of my own life. Blake stayed close, as he had all along, but there was a new ease between us. No tension, no unspoken rules, just honesty, trust, and the kind of quiet support I had longed for without realizing how much I needed it. We paused at a lookout overlooking the valley, the slopes glittering under the late afternoon sun. The mountains seemed to stretch forever, unbroken and strong, and I couldn't help but feel that my own foundation was finally the same. "You did it, Adeline," Blake said softly, his hand brushing against mine. "You faced everything alone when you had to, and you chose to stand for truth. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who trusted you. I looked at him, feeling warmth rise in my chest. I couldn't have done it without you, I admitted. You kept me grounded when I was spinning. You saw through everything I couldn't, and you never doubted me. He smiled, the kind of smile that made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't felt in years. I'll always have your back. You've got a lot of fight in you, Adeline, but you don't have to fight alone anymore. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow over the snow, and I felt something stir inside me, a mixture of relief, exhilaration, and the tender spark of hope. I realized that, for the first time, my life wasn't dictated by deception, betrayal, or fear. I had chosen my path, and I had someone to walk it with me. Blake reached out, taking both my hands in his. Adeline, I care about you. Not because of what you've been through, but because of who you are, brave, honest, and unyielding. I let myself smile, the first real, unguarded smile in a long time. I care about you too, Blake. More than I can put into words. He leaned closer, and I felt the warmth of his presence like a shield against the cold. The first kiss was gentle, grounding, a promise that we weren't just surviving anymore. We were thriving. As we pulled back, I felt the clarity of my rebirth settle fully within me. Kian and his lies were a closed chapter. What lay ahead was real, built on truth, trust, and the steady foundation of someone who respected every part of me. We stood there together, watching the sun dip behind the mountains, feeling the crisp air fill our lungs. And for the first time in years, I felt completely safe physically, emotionally, and spiritually. The snow beneath our boots crunched softly, a rhythm that felt like the heartbeat of a new life. I had survived the avalanche, the lies, and the betrayal. Now, I had something stronger than survival, a life worth living and a love worth trusting. With Blake at my side, I knew this was just the beginning.